Will Emma survive her encounter with the new pharmacist, Elinor Walker? That's what we're going to find out today as I rewatch Season 1, Episode 4, Ellie Comes to Town. This aired on October 24th, 1960, and it is written by Charles Stewart and Jack Ellenson, directed by Don Weiss. Let's go ahead and get into it and see what the episode has to offer. So the episode starts with Aunt Bee, Barney, and Andy pulling up to the pharmacy. Barney is going to give her a ride back a little later when they're done. But anyways, Andy and Aunt Bee are going to go into the pharmacy, do a little shopping, and Fred is not there yet. And so what does Andy do? He reaches up to the top of the doorway and he pulls a key down from there and lets himself in. Now, we don't exactly have that where we live, but I live in a small town and it's somewhat familiar. I mean, like I said, we do lock our doors, but I still live in a place where people leave their houses unlocked, their cars unlocked all the time. And being originally from the big city, that's something that you would never do. So while I can't completely relate to this, it is kind of cool to see this just because there's somewhat of a relation there. So as they go inside of the pharmacy, Aunt Bee is doing a little bit of shopping with Andy, and Andy's pretending to work there. And she asks for perfume, and as he goes over and grabs it, he makes the comment because it was made in Paris, France, talking about how he had been there during the war. And this was something that has always interested me because we never really get a full blown explanation of it. There's a lot of things like that in the Andy Griffith show that maybe kind of come and go or aren't fleshed out. But basically, he says that he was over there during the war. And when I've looked into it a little bit, you have to compare this perhaps with a couple other episodes, and you get into some continuity, probably errors, because basically with the date that he had graduated, if he was over in France, he would have been there after the war was over, some maybe during the rebuild period, which could work as well. But I just think it's very interesting because one of the things that I've thought of is, if it was before the war was over, what kind of a soldier was Andy Griffith if he was on the front lines? Would he have been a killer? Would he have would he have been an Upham? If you've seen the right movie, you know which one that was. And it's very interesting. It's a nice thought experiment. Who would he have been? Had he been an army soldier, a marine, something like that. Anyways, to continue. So as this is going on, Eleanor comes walking up and she notices that the front door is unlocked. She is obviously brand new to town, and Fred must not have given her the lowdown that sometimes people just help themselves, I guess, in a pharmacy. Not exactly something that could go on today. But she sees Barney sitting out there waiting and flags him down. Officer, officer, you got to help me. And as Barney finally gets out of the car, as he's pinned up against something, they get inside and he's ready for a robbery. He's got his gun out, which makes you wonder, did he even have a bullet in there? I kind of doubt that he did. And of course, he finds our favorite sheriff and Aunt Bee in there and is a little flabbergasted at the whole situation. So Eleanor is, she plays, when I've watched this scene before, sometimes I catch myself getting irritated by her because she's so uptight and serious. But when you think about it, I mean, she has no idea who these people are. She goes into the store and they're helping themselves. And then when she explains who she is, all they do is get kind of cutesy with her. And obviously, Andy is supposed to be attracted to her since she is a very good looking girl. And she does play it. She's playing kind of uptight in this scene, but it's right for the scene. I mean, she has no clue. She has no clue what's going on here. And this is supposed to be a store that she's going to be taking over from the sounds of it. And who are these people and what do they think they're doing? Now, I do want to add that in this scene, uh, Andy ends up totaling up his own purchase without her, even though she's kind of watching and getting kind of irritated. And he totals it, and if you go back and watch it, he totals it at $3.23. Yet he rings up $3.20 from the looks of it. Now, granted, I know it's only 3 cents. I know it's obviously something that they missed when they were filming it. But if we were to get playful with this, Andy just cheated the pharmacy. And as the transaction is over, you can see that Aunt Bee and Barney and Andy, they all kind of look at each other. They're having a hard time figuring out how to handle Ellie, or I guess trying to figure out what the first impression is. And they do a good job of that. They're two very counter sides here. One very friendly, one, like I said, would come across as uppity, but you were also in the store unannounced before they were even in there working. Now, Andy ends up going into the back room. You think that it's cutting away, but he ends up going to the back room and he has this one on one with Ellie. And, when you've heard of the background of there being a hard time of them having a good rapport with each other, I almost think you can see it here. I know it's supposed to be on purpose in this scene in a way. However, there is some awkwardness to it. Now she's very standoffish. She's supposed to be. Some strange guy was in the store, and now he's in the back room with her, and he diffuses it with some humor, and she ends up smiling as he's complimenting her, and we go into to what me almost feels like a kind of like a Leave It to Beaver type of scene, but there is something to it. It does feel a little different than what we've seen so far, and to what we will eventually see as a feel for the normal show in the later seasons. So as Andy is leaving, Emma comes in. Of course, one of my favorites, Emma, and Emma sets up the groundwork for this episode because as they have the greeting, she brings up the fact that he hadn't asked about her pain and if she had had one again. And so, of course, this is the central theme of the episode of Emma needing a fix for this pain. And Emma plays it really well. I think that Emma and Andy have such great chemistry right there when they're talking. And as Andy leaves, he leaves with an introduction with her and Ellie, and it goes just as sour as we would expect it to. Emma does a great job at going from quite cheerful to a little weary of who this Elinor lady is to just being ticked off. It was a really good scene. I like the way that she plays, and even Eleanor does a good job of just being flabbergasted because she has no idea what's going on with this and these so-called pills. Emma runs right across the street, straight to the sheriff's office, lays the whole story before the feet of Andy, and of course Andy has no grounds to enforce these pills to be distributed to her. And even though Andy tries his best to stop the situation from escalating, we of course get the classic scene of Emma leaving and walking out the door with a bad sheriff. I can't believe I voted for you in the last election. The next scene that we see finds us with Opie meeting the new pharmacist. And it's a cute little scene where she's cleaning the window and his face pops up. They make a couple faces back and forth. They get inside, and there's a little bit of dialogue going on between them two before Andy comes in. And the funny part here is, of course, where they write Opie perfectly because what does he do before exiting the scene? He says a childish thing because kids have no filters and is basically commenting on the fact that both of those two are not married and hinting at the fact that, hey, you guys aren't married, why don't you get together kind of thing. It's a good scene, and then as we you think it's going to be over, and then all of a sudden we see the head of Emma Brand going behind the counter trying to find those pills, and she was going to leave her dime to pay for them. Now, of course, Elinor, who is still kind of playing a little bit of an uptight part in this, she immediately says, "Hey, this is stealing. Arrest this person." And Andy, of course, can't because she didn't actually steal anything, and she was going to pay for it. Now, of course, Emma leaves mad, and then Andy leaves mad. And this is kind of the weird part in the show because Andy basically expresses to Eleanor, like, you should have a little sympathy. You should just give her pills. Now, granted, we know because we've seen the episode before that these are not actual medicinal pills. There's no narcotics or anything like that in them. But Andy doesn't know that at this point in the episode, and he's telling Eleanor, just go ahead and give them to her. Kind of an odd spot. Obviously, it's for the plot line, but if we were to just look at it objectively, you're like, Andy, maybe she really doesn't need to give her these pills just because you say so. In our next scene, we see the jailhouse, and Andy and Barney are there, and Barney is trying to, well, he has memorized, at least according to him, some rules for officers. He's memorized the first rule, and he's kind of bragging, and he tells Andy, "Here, go ahead and ask me it," and he gives him the book so he can read it and double check him. And we go through this scene where it's actually This scene is actually kind of copied a little later, I believe, with the Declaration of Independence, and that's kind of the more popular one. But he's going through this whole ordeal of trying to remember it. He's pushing his hair around. He just looks disheveled and he's stressed out. It's very funny. It is. It's a good scene, and Don Knotts is perfect at this kind of comedy. I guess you could say physical comedy, and he's just a master at it. And I actually just happened to have read a quote from him earlier in the week that basically explains it. This is from the Patriot News, and it says that there are two. This is from Knotts. He's saying there are two sides of the fence. Knotts said, who believed that not all comedy was exactly alike. You have to stick to a basic humor. There is such a thing. It's funny for everyone, but on satire, there's more disagreement. That's because the country is divided. And he's exactly right. This is basic humor, and that's why it's funny then, and that's why it's still funny now. And so after this, Aunt Bee comes in, and she wants Barney to drop off some food over to Emma, who's ailing, and this gets Andy going, and he wants to put a stop to all of this, and he takes off out of there with Barney. So they get to Emma's house. They're trying to figure out how to solve this ordeal, and they go inside to check on Emma because she's ailing, and she says she's very sick. And they go inside, and she is relaxed up on the couch. There's containers of food everywhere. She's snacking on, I think it was a turkey leg or something like that. And she's just having what appears to be a not such a bad time. Talks about how she's, soon going to be gone. And Ellie comes in and she gives her the pills. What an amazing development. Very quickly wrapping up. So Andy chases Ellie outside to talk with her for a minute. So as he catches up to her at her car, they have a conversation, and the revelation comes out that the whole town was basically on Elinor about this. She was getting a lot of flack from people, but then she realized that the pills that Emma had been getting the whole time were just sugar pills. So she was okay with doing it. And she tries to explain to Andy that, I'm a pharmacist. I have certain rules and regulations that I have to abide by. And Andy brings up a topic which he calls the human equation, that you have to take the person into consideration, even in a matter such as this. Now, granted, I think that with sugar pills, this is fine, but the but the thought kind of gets lost when you start getting in actual serious medications. Granted, the theme is okay. So after this, we see one last scene between Elinor and Andy, and he's basically asking about some type of if the pills are actually going to help because Emma has quite the stomachache after eating all of that food. And that wraps up our episode. It's a really fun episode, and I hope that you watch it. Now, I just want to add our regulars in this episode are Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, Ron Howard, Frances Bavier, and Elinor Donahue. She is supposed to be a series regular. She was actually signed on for 3 years, even though we don't see that. Cheerio Meredith returns as my favorite, Emma Brand. If I was to pick a favorite scene out of this episode, everybody would normally go probably for one of the Emma scenes or maybe the Don Knotts scene where he's trying to recite. I actually really liked the one where they're inside the pharmacy and Opie puts both Elinor and Andy on the spot with the whole marriage thing. The only reason that I say that is just because I have small children and sometimes they say the darndest things and they do put you on the spot. So it just kind of, it's a favorite one for me. Our Mayberry After Midnight score 1 through 5. 1, turning the channel if it's on. 2, fall asleep to it. 3, don't hate it, don't love it. It's okay. 4, lots to love, a few annoyances. 5, loved it, perfect episode. If I was to pick one, I would say, honestly, this is another 3 for me. It's 3 clovers. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's okay. If there was a moral lesson that we could find in here, I think it would have to be tied up with the conversation at the end that there is the human equation involved when we do things in life, so long as our values don't get lost in it. All right, well, that's the episode for today. I thank you for joining me. Please subscribe and join me again on the next episode on Deja Vu.